Well, one of the major sticking points is to pay for property tax relief. The state of New York is going to have to borrow money. And many people argue that makes no sense. We're going to borrow money, we're going to send a check to the homeowners, and their kids are going to pay the bill. At the same time, you also have an issue over whether or not property tax relief really is achieved if you simply restore some of the governor's school aid cuts. Many people say, no, that's not sufficient. We've been increasing school aid for more than a decade, and property taxes have not gone down, they've gone up. So there are issues over property tax relief, but there are also issues over the Senate itself. The Republicans show no willingness to give any votes for the budget. So that means all 32 Democrats have to agree. That's like herding cats. They don't agree on anything.
Love that analogy.
Several cats who are under investigation are facing civil action as well, which only complicates things. But bad kitty indeed. Increasingly, you talk about this kind of time warp feeling. More and more, this is starting to feel like last June, when there you had Senate Democrats and Republicans completely locked, and the governor moving to sort of increasingly, I guess you would say, creative efforts to kickstart the process to change something. This is, of course, the Senate coup. Here, you have the Assembly and the Senate really deadlocked, completely deadlocked, and the governor this week announcing that he was, in fact, going to put in a furlough for 100,000 state workers into the extender as an effort to, once again, apply pressure to the stakeholders to change the dynamic. Whether it works or not, I think, remains to be seen.
Yeah, 72% of people, I believe, is the number I saw, the Marist poll, where they are just angry that this is simply not getting done. Meanwhile, Governor Patterson threatening furloughs for state workers. It seems like that is probably fairly likely, right? Where are we with that? What happens?
They're going to likely be voted on Monday, it's expected, and that they will go through, because even though both legislative leaders and a lot of lawmakers themselves do not believe they are legal, the only option they would have is, because the governor is including them in his budget extenders, and if they don't act on it because they say, well, we don't believe in furloughs, so we won't pass the bill, then government shuts down totally. And no one wants that. They've said that they will pass the extender rather than shut government down and then let the courts decide on the furlough issue.
And what the governor has also said is, after months of trying to get give back from the large public workers unions, what he said this week is if they agree to a 5-day pay lag, which is essentially give it up this year and you'll get it back when you leave state service, or a give back of the 4% raises that the two largest unions got at the beginning of April, or hoped to get, but in fact that money was delayed, the furlough proposal would go away. And that's a quid pro quo. We'll see if they actually accede to it.
Well, in fact, those are the same ideas he presented in January when he presented his budget, and the large unions have all rejected it, and they show no signs of changing their position. Furloughs would take effect beginning May 17th. It would affect more than 100,000 state employees. Basically, the people who are exempted are people who work in jobs where health and public safety are involved. For example, state troopers and nurses and prison guards would not be impacted. Or if you're a management or confidential employee, and you're not affected because you're already not getting your raise for the second year running. And the governor's argument here is that everyone has to share the pain, that we're in a unique situation where we're running out of money, we're in the middle of a recession, and many other people have given up things, sacrificed. And all he's saying is the state workers need to sacrifice as well. And frankly, this message is resonating with private sector employees who either don't have their jobs any longer, they're paying more for their health insurance, and their pension is a dream that is not going to become reality.
The governor is rightfully frustrated. Everything he proposes just gets blown away, shot down, and they don't propose anything else.
Well, so who gets the blame? The legislature or the governor from those who wouldn't like it?
I would say the legislature right now. Look, the governor proposes, we're going to withhold funding because we can't afford right now to schools and health care. He gets sued over that. The governor says we're going to raise some revenue with a soda tax and increase the smoking tax. Legislature says no to that. He says, okay, we're going to withhold the income tax returns for 2 extra weeks. He gets blasted for that. Furloughs, they say he can't do. He withholds the 4% raises from the unions that they were due. He gets blasted and sued for that. Everything that he has proposed has been rejected, and then when he takes action, he gets blasted for that. So in that way, he is. There's a $9.2 billion deficit, and no one seems to want to deal with it right now.
Well, that's it. No one wants to deal with it. There's a $9.2 billion deficit, as you just said. Taxes only seem to go up over time. That's the ultimate solution. Whenever you're cutting something, you're hurting people. People are out there. They're getting hurt. There are families who are literally worried about putting food on the table. That proverbial, do you get your medicine or do you put food on the table? This is real. I talk with so many families who are absolutely just angered that they can't even make a decision to get a budget on time. Are these politicians ready for a tidal wave in November?
Well, they do understand that the public's angry. And that's why you're seeing them be so skittish in their public comments, whether it's about Joe Bruno or whether it's about whether or not they're going to vote for this furlough plan. At the same time, historically, New Yorkers say they hate the legislature, but they like their state senator and they like their assembly person. And if you look since 1982, only 38 incumbents have ever lost their reelection bids. So history is on the side of these people being reelected.
Different year this year, though, and the primaries are going to where it's going to happen, not necessarily the general elections.
But the best thing that the Democrats have going for them right now is that the Republicans don't have much of a bench. They're having trouble finding or settling on a gubernatorial candidate. They're having trouble getting sort of big names who might run against Kirsten Gillibrand, for example. So it's these points are all correct, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the Democratic majority is doomed. But certainly there's peril out there.
And I want to ask you, given that the Democratic majority and some of the elections that the races that we're seeing, the Attorney General race, for instance, with the straw poll that we just saw, which was, believe it or not, within this week, obviously they're trying to set themselves up a number of candidates, 5 candidates, I believe, running for Attorney General, and of course these guys are going for a position that isn't vacated yet. So kind of an odd situation there. What does this mean, though, ultimately, for these folks running for this office? That, one guy, Eric Denalo, gets the nod, but it's the rural conference, and there's some downstate folks.
Right. It is. The rural conference represents about 25% of the weighted vote at the Democratic convention. This is like the Iowa caucuses in the presidential race. What it did for Eric Denalo is it gave him name recognition, it gives him some momentum, it'll help him raise money for his campaign. The number 2 person, Kathleen Rice, the Nassau County District Attorney, came in second. Denalo beat her 2-1, but she did okay. And Andrew Cuomo has made it very clear he likes Kathleen Rice as a candidate. Then you had Sean Coffey. He's a former federal prosecutor. He did better than most people thought. And then the other 2 gentlemen are State Senator Eric Schneiderman of Manhattan and Assemblyman Richard Brodsky of Westchester. They didn't do so well. However, particularly Senator Eric Schneiderman has a lot of support downstate, particularly in Manhattan. So I don't think you can count any of them out. And in fact, the state Democratic chair, Jay Jacobs, told me a few days ago, it's very possible that all 5 candidates will be on the primary ballot.
And most of the votes in the Democratic primary come from the metropolitan area downstate. So this is, like James says, it's good if you're Eric Denalo and nobody knows who you are. But ultimately, a lot of this is going to be decided downstate.
Okay. Casey, any last word?
No. Well, it's been a heck of a week. I'm exhausted.
And that is where we're going to leave it. Casey Seiler, James Medore, Ken Levitt, thank you so much for weighing in on some of the big issues that we saw this week.